The following is a program of the Santa Barbara County Education Office. To learn more, visit sbceo.org.
I'm Susan Salcido, Santa Barbara County Superintendent of Schools, and I am so delighted to introduce my guest today, Anthony Rodriguez. Anthony, thank you so much for being here today and for spending time with us.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Really, thank you. Really looking forward to talking with you and having you share some of your story and the impact. I need to tell the audience today that you wear many, many hats for our community. A formal role that you have is that you're employed by the Santa Barbara Food Bank of Santa Barbara County.
Correct.
But that's just one slice of the pie. You actually are a founding member and an educator, I'll call, for the Santa Barbara Response Network.
Yeah.
You provide psychological first aid training. You are with youth. You are with families. You are with community members all the time. It's been said that you don't sleep, so that you provide all of that. And I know that programs in which you've served have been recognized by the governor and the mayor of Santa Barbara, and that you were rightly named Santa Barbara Independent Community Hero just a few years ago. So it is my honor to sit across from you, Anthony, and to help you share the story of your impact in Santa Barbara County.
Thank you.
So I'd like to start with where you were brought up, born, raised, brought up. Can you start with that?
Yeah, sure. I was raised in East Los Angeles, so growing up there was very, very difficult. I've been shot, I've been stabbed, I've been left for dead. Growing up was a very tough time. My dad died when I was 5 years old, and he died in front of me. And from there things kind of went south. I was sexually abused by a family member at the age of 5, right after my father passed away. So with that, my voice was taken away, and I felt like I had no voice when I was young.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear all of that, and I know you've shared that story with other community members as now you've turned it around and turned it into a source of an opportunity to educate and support the community. But I do want to go back to East Los Angeles, and that's where you were born?
Yeah, actually I was born in Puerto Rico.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
And so how old were you when you landed in California?
I was a little bit before a year old.
Okay, so you were
pretty much
an infant. All right. And so did you attend public schools in Los Angeles then? Elementary, junior high, high school?
Actually, I got expelled from 3 districts when I was in high school, so I didn't get to have a chance to finish.
You didn't have a chance to finish.
Right.
And when you look back in your childhood at school, were there happy times for you for any of your classes, students, teachers?
It's kind of blurry, to be honest with you. The abuse took a lot out of me, and it took a lot out of my family, but my family didn't know. I rebelled, I got into a lot of trouble.
Sure.
Then I began to hear that, I wasn't good enough, that I was not going to be anything, that I was worthless, and, you begin to believe it. And that's kind of where I was at, and I didn't feel like I was worth it, so I actually attempted 3 times to take my own life, just because I was tired of hurting people, and I felt it was better that way.
And that's a really profound circumstance in your life that is an issue for individuals today in terms of suicide and attempts. So we'll talk about that too. Do you have brothers and sisters?
I have a brother and I have a twin sister, but they basically disowned me since I was 15. Yeah, so I haven't talked to them since then.
Okay. And I know you've built your life. It's a different story today than it was in your childhood, which I think is important to talk about, just as important as your stories. Talk about the story of coming through it and the resiliency. And so let's go there. You know, you Anthony, you talked about abuse. You talked about suicide. You haven't yet spoken about the gang life that you lived.
Right.
But I think what's important is that it seems to me anyway, that you've had those experiences and they've been extremely deep and troubling and challenging, but they haven't defined who you are. In other words, you've come out of it and you've really built resiliency in yourself, and you're giving back to the community.
Yeah,
please.
I've taken so much from the community. As you know, when I was younger, getting jumped into a gang at the age of 12, I was tattooed from the neck all the way down. So, living like that was difficult, but at that moment I didn't care. And I hurt a lot of people, and I was tired of seeing that, and I think I was tired of burying my friends. I was going to a funeral every week. Yeah, that's at the least. And I felt I needed to change, and I wanted to change something, but I didn't know how. And when I met my wife over here in Santa Barbara, it was the first time that I actually had somebody willing to get to know me as a person, not for what I was going through or what had happened to me or how I was. And that really allowed me to make that change and feel more comfortable. And, my wife was also abused, so there was no judgment there. And I think not having that judgment made a big difference on how I felt about myself. And ever since then, she's given me a lot more. She always gives me, the backbone that I need, and she's my rock. And and I think that's that a lot of people miss. They don't have that. They don't have the person that they can talk to and just be open with. You're always judged no matter what it is that you do. And I didn't have that with my wife. My wife was like, you know what? I hear that you're on drugs. I know that you've been in a lot of trouble. She freaked out when she first saw me with my shirt off because she didn't realize how many tattoos I had. But she just said, we're going to get through it together. I'm not going to leave you alone. And for the first time, I actually believed somebody. And that's where it all started.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
You mentioned that she saw you. She really saw you. She saw through all of those experiences. Right. And she also saw you without judging.
Yeah.
Which is really key, it sounds like, for you. How do we do that for children, youth, teens, adults that have gone through really adverse situations like you have? How do we allow them to have an opportunity to be seen and not judged? What are ways in which they can get that too?
It depends on the person that's wanting to help the person that is struggling. We're not angels, and we're not perfect. Nobody's perfect, and I think that a lot of people forget that. And a lot of people are quick to make judgment, and that's what hurts people. That's why we don't want to talk. I never really wanted to ever say anything about my sexual abuse because it's either your fault. Why did you let it happen? You should have said something. It's not that easy. Right. It's not. It's so hard because, when the Local Hero story came out, I had a lot of people turn their backs on me, and I didn't understand why, because I thought I was doing something good, and it really hurt. But that's why we don't talk about suicide. We don't talk about sexual abuse, especially in the Latino family, families.
Why do you think people turn backs on you? Why do you think now that you know what you know?
You know what? I don't know if they've been through something like that, or they may know somebody that has gone through it in their family. It's very weird, but I need people to realize that it hurts. And that's why we don't say anything, is when we're being judged, Mental health conditions is a mental health condition, just like if it's diabetes. Being sexually abused, it's not your fault. When you're a kid, you're a kid. You're there to be protected by the person that is taking care of you. You trust them. And for them to betray that trust and throw it on you as a kid is wrong. And that's why I feel it's important for me to speak up and speak out, because there's so many kids it happens to, and they stay quiet because they don't feel that they have that voice. And I feel that's why I need to have that voice for them. I've been criticized, I've been put down, and there's been a lot, but I think what keeps me going is knowing that with the kids that I help, it really brings them out of the darkness and into the light. So it makes a difference.
Makes a difference. Having a voice, you providing a voice, or a child or young person speaking their voice sounds very important. It also sounds really important that if you're the one that is listening, that you listen without judgment, and that's
Right.
really key. And so I wanted to ask you, you mentioned tattoos. You don't have them anymore, at least I can't see.
Yeah, I got them removed. It took about 10 years to get them removed.
10 years.
Yeah.
And how did that happen?
Through Dr. Padilla here at the Liberty Program.
Liberty Program.
Yeah.
Can you say a word about the Liberty Program for people who don't know?
Yeah, Liberty Program is a nonprofit organization that actually helps young kids and adults take off tattoos that are gang related for them to have a second chance. And actually that has given me a second chance, because when I first moved here, my first experience in Santa Barbara was a lady asked me if I was from LA, and I said yes, and she told me off and told me that I didn't belong here because of all my tattoos. So I got them removed. Well, not all of them, but some of them.
Those that I can't see any. I can't see
yeah,
any.
the ones on the neck and the arms, yeah.
How did you arrive to Santa Barbara County?
Oh, that's a funny story. A friend of mine was supposed to be with another friend of mine, but she didn't like that friend. She liked me, and then I ended up over here, and then I met my wife, and then
Relationships got you
there you
here.
go.
Okay, well, I
There
guess
you
we're
go.
very fortunate about the fact that you got here.
Yeah.
And earlier, you were talking about the gang involvement, and so I really want you to talk about today's youth and gang involvement, because it exists.
Yes, it does.
And it's a strong community.
It is.
And I know you enough to know that you would invite youth today and families today to really consider not being part of it.
Right.
But say a bit about why somebody would join a gang and what ways in which we can prevent youngsters from joining.
What I noticed, and I can only speak on my personal experience, is the fact that I felt like I needed support. I needed somebody to stand behind me in my difficult times, in my rebellious times, and not tell me that I was doing anything wrong. And that's what I got from them. I was picked on as a kid because I'm short, and I'm still short. I didn't grow, but that was one thing that I couldn't stand, and that's what they provided. It was
Safety.
Safety at that time. But when you become more involved and you don't know what you're getting into, it can get pretty intense.
Yeah, and unsafe.
Oh, extremely unsafe. Yeah, like I said, I've been shot, been stabbed, been left for dead. Every day I take off my shirt, I have scars that will never allow me to forget where I came from. And going back to what you said is I don't let it define me, but all the things that I've been through has allowed me to help others, because I've been through something similar, not the same,
Right.
but something similar. And that has given me an opportunity to be able to speak to people that may not want to speak to anybody else.
Have you spoken to youth who have considered being involved in a gang or are?
Yeah.
And have you been able to encourage some youth not to begin being involved?
Yeah, actually I have here at Our Lady Guadalupe Church, I'm with confirmation. I'm with the teens there, and there is some teens that were just consistently getting into trouble. They're getting into gangs, and there's 5 kids that really stood out to me, and they were about to get in a gang fight. This is when the stabbing happened here, down on State Street. And that was the first time I actually shared my story, because somebody had said that I needed to talk to these kids. These kids hated me. They thought I was a cop. But after I shared my story, it really changed the way that these kids looked at me. And it made me realize that I did need to speak up about it. And now one of them is a Marine, and the other one, he graduated high school early. We went to their graduations, and we went to the Marine graduations. And that's one thing that I promise, is that if I'm going to say I'm going to do something, that I need to follow through. And that's one thing that as a parent, I really suggest that you do, is if you talk to your kids and you say you're going to do something, please follow through with it. Don't just say you're going to do it and not do it, because these kids never forget. And no matter how young you are, when there's a promise made to you, you remember. And about listening, you really have to listen, not just hear people. And that's what people do. We hear a lot of things going on, but we really don't listen. We don't listen to the words that actually really mean something, and they're trying to tell you. And that's one thing I strongly suggest, is that you do pay attention and listen to the words, because you'll be amazed of what you actually hear.
It's great advice.
Yeah.
Yeah, really, really great advice. Thank
Yeah.
you. And thank you for following up on those individuals that you just talked
Oh yeah,
about.
no, they're great.
Yeah, it sounds like they've really turned a corner
Yeah.
thanks to you and the efforts of many, I'm
Yeah.
sure.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Earlier we talked about the Response Network, Santa Barbara Response Network, of which
Yeah.
you're a founding member.
Yep.
And so let's pause on that, because again, we talked about multiple hats.
Right.
But what does that network provide, and what do you provide for the network today?
Okay. So the network provides psychological first aid for families that have been affected by any trauma in regards of suicides, homicides, and traumatic events. And they provide a listening ear. And, you know, we did respond to like the Isla Vista shooting, you know, the boat accident, many suicides, the gravel truck incident that killed 3 people. So we've been assisting this community for a very long time, since 2009. And it started because there was a rash of suicides here on the east side. And so a lot of people came together. We brought in Dr. Robert Macy. Well, actually, the Glennon Association brought in Dr. Robert Mason, and many people got trained, and then just a few of us decided to create the Santa Barbara Response Network. And so now it's a nonprofit organization. We respond 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they have excellent responders from many different walks of life. And it's an amazing organization, and we do provide psychological first aid training.
And that's
Also.
something that you do.
Yeah, that's what I do. Yeah,
Yes.
so I have taken a step back because I need to make sure that, you know, I'm good to be able to do
right.
that. So yeah, but no, it's a very strong organization, and I'm very grateful to be part of it. It's done an amazing job.
Incredible organization.
Yeah, it's been a blessing.
And how does the organization, Santa Barbara Response Network, get called in for those emergencies that you just mentioned?
They can call in by, you know, fire, police, and just by a community member. They can call the 805-699-5608 and request somebody to respond.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. And so now let's turn one dial and talk
Yeah.
about the Food Bank of Santa Barbara, of which
Yeah.
you're employed.
Yes, I am.
Yes, and let's talk about the work you do there, because it's somewhat related, actually.
Right, yeah. No, it's working at the food bank has been amazing. I just started, but the position I hold is the operations and disaster specialist. And I'm really excited about the position because it's bringing, you know, food distributions into the, you know, to areas that, you know, were affected by, you know, let's say the mudslide. We'll be able to provide the food and stuff like that. But we created a multi-agency feeding plan and a feeding task force, so that compiles of the food bank, Red Cross, and Salvation Army. And then Office of Emergency Management is right behind it. So it's been a really, really good experience. And, you know, now we have a way that we'll be able to go through either Office of Emergency Management in a large-scale disaster, or if it's just a local disaster, then, you know, a local entity can give us a call and let us know that they, you know, there's a shortage of food, and we can go ahead and provide that, you know, mobile distribution sites, and that's actually really cool. So, and then with that, I'm training the food bank employees on disaster preparedness. They're all taking the community emergency response team training, and then right after that, we'll be doing the volunteers. Because we really want people to realize that we are wanting to make that change, and we are, you know, getting ready ourselves, our community ready, and we'll also be able to provide information at our distributions for families in regards of disaster preparedness, you know, give them whatever it is that we can provide.
So let's go back to the response you just gave, and I wanted to break it apart and ask a few questions about it.
Okay.
The first part having to do with the Food Bank of Santa Barbara County, and it sounds like you're collaborating with some really powerful agencies throughout Santa Barbara County.
Yes.
It's really exciting, and thank you for doing that work. So that's one piece.
Yeah.
Another piece, as part of your role at the Food Bank, is that you're providing Cert Training. And you just spelled that out. Can you spell it out again?
Sure, it's the Community Emergency Response Team.
Okay, so what are some of the big bullet points or the big goals of that training?
Is for them to be able to feel comfortable coming to volunteer or coming to work during a disaster. With them being prepared, they're also going to be preparing their family, and that is one of the most important things for us, is that we want them to feel comfortable to come in, but most important, that their families are also okay. And so they're getting trained in disaster preparedness, fire, disaster medical, disaster psychology, a little bit of terrorism, and team organization, which is very key, especially working with a large organization.
So Anthony, I really appreciate all that you've shared so far about your history, a little bit about some of the work you do. I know it's just there's so much. Yeah. But I want to ask you, at what point in your life did you think, I've had these experiences, I really think it's important to share this with the community. At what point, was there a day, a moment, something that happened?
When the kids were getting into trouble here in Santa Barbara, when the gang issue came up a little bit, when there was a stabbing on State Street, sharing my story for the first time with these kids, I seen the impact that it made on them. They were willing to open up, talk to me, stop me, when they didn't want to say anything to me. And when they told me how they felt and what they thought, that really made me see things in a different light and made me realize that I do have to say something. And the more and more that I speak about, talking about, abuse, I've had many people come up to me right after the talk and tell me that they've been abused and that they just didn't have a voice. And so most of the time when I do go give talks, I already have a report ready just in case I do have to file a report. And every time that we do, I don't leave those people behind. I stay with them the whole time.
Yeah. How important do you think it is, and I think it's very significant, but I'm just wondering the impact you believe, that when people hear your story, that they can identify with you. In other words, they see themselves in you so that they come and talk to you. Do you think that's a really important element for many of our families and youth?
Yeah, because for me personally, I couldn't talk to anybody that didn't go through something similar. I felt that they weren't going to understand or even get a little bit of it. And I didn't want to do that. I didn't feel it was necessary to even talk to them about it because I didn't feel that they can help me. And I feel that with my experiences and the things that have happened to me when I've opened up with people, then they feel more comfortable speaking to me about it. And it does make a huge difference from what they tell me.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And you talked about supporting individuals that were interested in gang membership and gang life. You've talked about abuse and helping those with experiences that they have had and they've come up to you. Right. Let's linger a minute on suicide prevention, because I know that's another really big component of your life and your outreach. So you mentioned earlier and shared that that's something that you've experienced yourself in terms of attempts. But say a little bit for viewers, what's important for us to know about teens or youth that are considering suicide? What's important that we know? How do we help?
The way that you can help is by really actually listening, like I had mentioned before. That is, it's key. And I understand that a lot of parents are always busy, but if your kid or your child says, you know what, I want to talk, then you need to stop doing what you're doing and really take a look and listen. A lot of kids don't have that because parents are always busy, which is understandable, but yet when your child is ready to talk, then you need to stop and you need to listen. And suicide ideology is consistent here, and we really have to pay attention. So if somebody says, I want to kill myself, I'm done, you need to pay attention. If somebody's starting to give away little things that are really important to them and they feel that they don't need it anymore, that's another sign. Mood changes, changes in appetite, if they always tired, that's another sign. You have to really pay attention and listen, and not be afraid to ask a question. Are you thinking about dying by suicide? And a lot of people, there's a lot of myth that says that if you talk about suicide, then you're going to put it in their head. That's not true.
Right. Research shows exactly
Correct.
The opposite.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Listening and being active listeners is such an important piece that you're sharing consistently with through this interview. So I really appreciate that. What do you think about the importance of having a mentor? And did you have one, or who is that for you?
My mom. My mom has been a blessing. When I was younger, I didn't see that. But now I do, that she's never left me and that she's always been there for me. And now she has Alzheimer's. So, it's really hard to be able to see that. You regret the things that you do when you're a kid. And so that's another thing I try to tell kids, that, when you have your parents, take advantage of the time that you do have with them. I know sometimes it can all be a pain, but it is what it is. But you don't want to feel like you've missed something and you made that mistake of not being able to express whatever it is that you feel. And you know, sometimes I get my mom back, and now I take every, you know, opportunity to actually tell her I love her. But my mom's been an amazing person. She's always been very strong. Another mentor is Gina Carvello from the Glendon Association, which is also part of the Santa Barbara Response Network. She's been really, really amazing. She's always stood by me and told me that I could do things that a lot of people thought that I couldn't. And Evangie Diaz, which she passed away a while back, but she's the one that ran the Liberty program, and she was always on my butt, which was nice. But she always told me to stand up for myself and not let anybody put me down and tell me that I wasn't worth it, and for me to stand up what I believed in, and that's what I've been doing as much as I could. And you know, God, I have so many. I mean, Yoli McGlinchey from the fire department, she's been a really, really good mentor in regards of teaching me a lot of the emergency response things, and you know, also giving me a lot of encouragement. So, yeah. I mean, I have a lot of people, but yes, those pretty much, and my wife.
And your wife.
My wife.
Of course. Of course.
My wife is amazing, you know, she's just a blessing, so.
Well, thank you for sharing that, and I know that you've been a mentor to many as well. And as we wind down the show and our time together, I want to ask you a question from your perspective as a survivor. You are a survivor, and you're a very, very powerful person in our community. If I wanted to ask you a question, which is, you're talking about building resiliency, and you're, you know, having individuals go through difficult, challenging, adverse experiences, but making it through. How, as a community, can we help to build a resilient community for our youth, for their future?
You know, learning the communication skills. Communication is it's key in anything that you do. And when you don't have that communication, then you can't be able to strengthen your ties. And that's one thing that has given me an opportunity to become resilient, because I can speak about what it is that I feel, you know, with certain people and not be judged. So that gives me the strength to be wanting to go forward and not be put down. You know, just being a community, that's one thing that we often miss. We have to help each other out. I mean, we need to realize that we're all human and we all bleed the same. And we need to stop judging and start realizing the things that we have in front of us, because we have such an amazing community. It's a blessing to be here, to be honest with you, and to see how much people can come through and strive. Well, it's because you can't do it alone. Nobody can do it alone, and it's okay to ask for help, and it's okay to reach out, because that's when you know that you can be resilient and you can be strong. But you know, sometimes we always need somebody else to make us realize what we have inside, and that's resilience. But you know, you just need that little kick sometimes.
Anthony, thank you so much for spending time with this interview today.
I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And thank you, of course, for the impact that you make in the county through all the different roles that you play, the hats that you wear, and the influence you have on the youth and community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
I'm Susan Salcido, Santa Barbara County Superintendent of Schools, and thank you so much for joining us today for this edition of Talking with Teachers.